Hi, my name's Alan Foulkes. I'm from Oxford, England, and I'm here to talk about my experiences with Kundalini Awakening, both the positive experiences and the more challenging ones, with the hope that this will be useful for people going through Kundalini Awakening and also of interest to those that might be wanting to know more about Kundalini Awakening. Probably 3.5 years ago, I used to do regular meditations where I did Reiki on myself and I did visualizations. And one night I did this meditation. I did it really quite well, but then I fell asleep. Then I had this incredibly vivid dream of looking at a sort of a statue of Buddha, and on this statue, this energy started to arise, and everything started to get quicker. And then I woke up and I felt this energy rising up from my genital area, rising up to my stomach. And I was seeing colours, and I was seeing pictures, and I thought, oh shit, this is Kundalini Awakening. And I knew a little bit about Kundalini Awakening because of I had trained in Reiki, but I knew enough to actually be really quite scared of it, and I didn't want it to awaken because I didn't know how to handle it. So what I did was, I woke up, sat up in bed, and I consciously forced the energy back down again. And also I stopped doing the meditation, I stopped doing Reiki on myself, and sort of forgot about it all really. Then about a year later, I was going through an unusual period of anxiety, which I hadn't normally suffer from anxiety, but it's really quite extreme. I was made redundant. I worried about getting another job. Then when I got a job, I worried about having too much work on, and then this friend recommended that I went to an acupuncturist because I was really finding it hard to function. The anxiety level was very high. And I explained to the acupuncturist that I thought this anxiety was not really relating to work, but it's relating to sort of unresolved anxieties that went back to childhood, when my mum was very ill from when I was 7 to 16. And I thought this related, well, I think quite rightly, this anxiety related to unresolved feelings going back to then. And the acupuncturist said that she could use the acupuncture to resolve this by basically undoing blockages that were caused by unresolved emotions. And she told me that I needed to really just open up. And so she put all these pins in me, and it was incredibly powerful. Each pin, I could just feel the energy. And then I don't know how long I was there for. It was quite a long time, but gradually this energy just built up, and it just kept on moving up my body. And I've totally forgotten about the Kundalini. I was just totally involved in this. And she told me to open up, keep on opening up, which I did. And the energy kept on rising. And it's very, very powerful. And it got to up to my head. And then, because I started to see the scene. It's like a William Blake painting of all these clouds. And so I saw all these clouds, and in the middle of the clouds, you could see the clouds were just beginning to thin. There was sort of a light just beginning to form, a round light in the middle of these clouds. And the energy kept on rising. I had little visualizations of childhood as well while this was happening, and sort of resolving childhood issues. And then it got to the point where the cloud actually dissipated in this circle, and suddenly I could see the golden light the other side of the clouds, and the energy just went whoosh right the way through me, which felt quite ecstatic. And that was the end of the session. And I just felt everything, I felt totally clear, everything felt cleared. And so I then, after thanking the acupuncturist, I'd cycled home and I could see everything, incredibly everything. I live in Oxford and some of the buildings, as you can imagine, are really quite beautiful, and they seemed, you know, even more beautiful than normal. And I got home and I could see that everything was one. Absolutely everything was one. And I just live in a normal 1930s built flat, part of flats built as houses built as 4 flats, and even that seemed beautiful. And I just could sense the whole oneness of everything. And then, interesting, a neighbour came up to me who's always had lots of problems. She came to talk about. She always comes to talk about her problems, and I realised I couldn't stand within a metre of her. I felt her negative energy, and I was literally bouncing off her. So that was quite unusual. I don't know how far to go on now, because basically for 24 hours I was in this state of, you know, bliss, really, extreme positivity. But then about 24 hours later, because I was very tired, I was back home at this point, and I just laid down and drifted off to a sort of a light sleep. And in this light sleep, I was in the Mexican desert with these 2 very shady characters, and they beckoned me into this. It's like a cave, but it's like a nightclub in the middle of the desert. And there was a sign above the nightclub, actually, which I think something like "Enter at your own peril" or something like that. But anyway, in this light dream, I walked into the nightclub. Then I woke up, and I just felt the energy change, so in my stomach, which is below my stomach. And then I went from being in bliss to extreme anxiety. And over the following days, that became worse. And also, I was getting huge eruptions of energy that, instead of going right the way through me, would get stuck sort of in my head. And I remember lying on my living room floor, sort of in agony, with my head feeling that it was going to explode. And I was in an extreme state of anxiety. And I think, in a way, rather foolishly, I actually went to mental health services saying, "Look, I've got this problem, can you help me?" Which was not probably the best idea. So I was then on the mental health services radar. I was given medication for anxiety, and also I was given antipsychotic medication. Over the next few days, I felt that things were just getting worse. One of my brothers came to live with me for a few days to help out, but obviously he had to go home. And then I just got to the stage where I was convinced I was dying. And I actually sat on the end of my bed for 2 days, 2 whole days, without really sleeping, just sat on the end of my bed, waiting to die. Also, interestingly, at this point, I was hearing a lot of flute music, sort of like spiritual flute music. And I didn't answer the phone, the door, but after a couple of days, I did answer the door, and this old friend of mine and his friend came in, and I explained to them I was dying, and they were obviously concerned. And it ended up with a couple of psychiatric nurses coming around, because, as I said, I had put myself on the radar. And then the mental health assessment happened, and I was admitted to hospital. And when I got to hospital, I was convinced I was dying. We actually drove past the general hospital and ended up at the psychiatric hospital, which I found quite. Why aren't I in the general hospital? Because I'm dying. But anyway, I was admitted to the hospital. I actually woke up the next morning, which surprised me because I thought I was dying. But then that followed 6 weeks in the hospital, which was in itself a really traumatic experience, which I wouldn't really recommend. And the relevant thing to say on this, explaining the whole the original experience, was that I learnt very quickly I needed to, I had tried to explain to the medics that I was going through a Kundalini Awakening, and I printed off information from the internet. It was very clear that this was just seen purely as psychosis. It was seen as, pathology. I wasn't being listened to at all, which obviously made the experience a lot worse. I couldn't actually explain to anyone really what was happening to me. And also, luckily I had the foresight not to tell them that I was hearing celestial flute music because that would not have helped things. They would have given me more medication. As it was, they put me on a high level of antipsychotic, olanzapine, and which was not a great thing.